So thank you guys for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Special Agent Miguel Sandoval, Sandoval.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be part of this. Happy we got through a little bit of the IT difficulties here, but I'm glad to be here. My name is Miguel Sandoval. I'm a special agent here with the FBI. I've been here a little over 5 years. I'm currently the Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Coordinator for our division. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today about the potential risk of children becoming victims of online enticement. Due to school closings, due to this pandemic, children have an increased online presence and in a position that puts them in inadvertent risk. And therefore, this is an ideal time for online predators to actively seek vulnerable children. A little bit of background, every year thousands of children become victims of crimes, whether it be through kidnappings, violent attacks, sexual abuse, among others, especially by online predators. The mission of the FBI, specifically the Crimes Against Children and Human Trafficking Program, is to identify, prioritize, more importantly, investigate and deter individuals and criminal networks from exploiting children. Not only are we in the business of capturing and arresting those that commit the crime, but we also have a purpose of helping those victims of federal matters. We want to warn parents, educators, caregivers, and children about the dangers of online sexual exploitation. This comes in many forms. Individuals may coerce victims into providing sexually explicit images or videos of themselves, often in compliance with the offender's threats to post that images that were publicly sent of the victim to friends and family and other folks. This is what we typically refer to as sextortion. That's an actual violation that the FBI works. Other offenders may casually contact children online, gain their trust, introduce sexual conversation. That increases over time. The severity increases over time. Ultimately, this activity results in maintaining an online relationship that includes sexual conversations in the exchange of illicit images that eventually lead to them meeting the child in person. During these uncertain times, parents, guardians should probably communicate with their children and watch for any changes in behavior, including an increase in nightmares, withdrawal behavior, anxiety. There's a bunch of things to be aware of: depression, not wanting to be alone with someone. And quite frankly, if your child has a sudden increase in knowledge regarding sexual matters, that's a sign. Typically, for victimization to stop, children have to come forward to someone. Usually it's someone they trust. Sometimes it's someone that's a stranger. Although parents and law enforcement are typically available, the personnel usually that's readily available are those at schools, personnel at recreational activities, a multitude of folks. Right now, due to COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions associated with school distancing, the folks at school are just not available, whether those be school resource officers, whether it be counselors. There's an array of folks that are just not available to children to come forward to outside of their parents or perhaps law enforcement. Parents can take the following measures to help educate and prevent children from becoming victims of online predators and possibly sexual exploitation matters. I want to talk about this a little bit, okay? Some of the things you can do. This is not all-encompassing, it's just some of the matters. You can talk with your children about internet safety. Of all ages, engage in online activity. Review and approve their games, their apps. before they're downloaded. Actually, what I would suggest is if your child is using an app, you might want to download that app your own self and just become familiar with the features of that app. What can and can you not do, independent of what type of restrictions you can put on that app. Evaluate privacy settings and set them to the appropriate level. We all might want to put the most strict level, but the older your child, the more unlikely that's going to happen. But just try to set it to an appropriate level. Monitor your children's online activity. Uh, this is pretty much said over and over, but when they are online, maybe it's best for them to be in an open environment, in a common room. Something that I advise, I do with my own children, I let them be online by themselves, but then I kind of sneak up on them and randomly just, hey, how you doing? And I just observe their physical reactions. Are they reacting in a surprised manner just for me coming into their room? Or are they all of a sudden looking at the screen and trying to find a way to hit that X button? Okay? Check your children's profiles and what they post online. You might not be able to keep up on what they post online, but that initial profile that was set, that might not be the default image that's on there any longer. Explain to your children how when you post something online, it's essentially there forever. And they're told this over and over again, but quite frankly, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to say it again. Make sure your children know that anyone who asks to engage in sexual acts should report it to a parent, a guardian, someone they trust, law enforcement. Remember that victims should not be afraid to talk to law enforcement. If they are being sexually exploited, it's not a crime for a child to send sexually explicit images to someone if they are compelled or coerced to do so. A lot of times they think they're going to get in trouble. From our perspective, they are a victim of a federal matter. Let's switch a little bit into a topic in terms of victim reporting. What do you do? If you have information, whether it be direct or indirect, who do you report it to? We want to help minimize victimization, okay? Some of the folks you can contact is your local law enforcement agency. A lot of times people call 911, they go to the local dispatch police department, and I get it. Sometimes it's frustrating. The person you're interacting with is not only not knowledgeable on internet matters, but they're not knowledgeable perhaps on crimes against children matters. Not everybody has the training and expertise to work these matters, but make contact with someone. If that doesn't work, you could call your local FBI office. You could submit a tip to us. It's tips.fbi.gov, tips.fbi.gov. You can submit a tip to NCMEC. That's the National Center for the Missing and Exploited Children. Their number is 1-800-843-5678. And you can submit an online tip. There are multiple avenues for you to do this. Their website would be www.cybertipline.org. When you report a tip, right, it's very important to provide as much information as you can. We're not asking you to be investigators when somebody approaches you with information, but as a parent, a guardian, perhaps go a little bit beyond just the initial shock of what just happened to that child, my child, someone else's child. Ask a little bit more information. Some of the stuff we would like to have is the name and the username of the suspect, the subject, whether it be his real name, his AKA, his online name, the actual screen name, everything helps. Their email address, a phone number, whether that's a real phone number or not. You will be surprised what we can do with information that is not accurate. All right? So whatever you can get, provide it to us. Let us make the determination if that information is going to be helpful. The websites used a description of everything they did. More importantly, this typically applies to parents. Try to keep all the original documentation, the emails, the text messages, the logs of the communications, everything you can. As a parent, I get it. What we want to do is report the account, delete the account, and forget it forever, and take that phone away from our child. I would advocate taking the phone away from the child, but the other things, give law enforcement a chance to evaluate what you have. Tell law enforcement about everything that occurred on that online encounter. If you can find a way to know how they met, how they initially started communicating, that would be very helpful. A lot of times, when a minor comes forward to law enforcement or to a parent, we'll get more information. But in many occasions, it's an administrator, a parent, that discovers something, and all we know is what they know on the spot. It would be awesome if we knew how they got to that point. So that's a couple of things I want to speak about. Now let's switch to not a completely separate topic, but something that's kind of hot on the press right now. Zoom bombing. I'm sure if you guys were not on mute right now, everybody would say something to the effect of, yes, 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 let's talk about that. I want to emphasize that the term Zoom bombing is being used predominantly out there right now. However, this is not specific just to Zoom, okay? It's just what's in the news the most. This applies to any video teleconferencing platform. Those that are famous out there, you have Zoom right now, Skype, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeetings. There's a multitude out there. The one that's in the press right now is Zoom, and unfortunately for them, this is the tagline that's absorbing with folks. So the FBI recommends a couple of things. Exercise due diligence and caution in your cybersecurity efforts. I apologize. It looks like somebody is. Are we still good? Okay. So the following steps can be taken. Don't make meetings available on classrooms or on public forums, okay? Don't post your meeting ID on Facebook or some other social media accounts where everybody knows what your meeting ID is, okay? Some of the other things we can do is don't share the link for your telecon. Don't provide the link, only provide the link to specific folks, the people who are joining your meeting. Now, a lot of these apply to Zoom, but they apply to other platforms, such as this meeting right here that we're having on Skype. If possible, although we have some technical difficulties, try to give all controls to the host. You would assume that by default, most platforms would have this incorporated. However, that is not the case. As you just saw earlier, when you log on, you could share your screen. And in this environment, we are not thinking that nefarious things are going to happen. But as you've been seeing, quite frankly, in the news and your environment, there are a lot of cases out there right now, not only in El Paso, but nationwide. Consider the security requirements when selecting a vendor, right? A lot of us have children that are going to school online right now, whether it be through Zoom or other platforms. But I know some parents who are taking the opportunity to research online, whether it be through their Kindles, their iPads, resources available online where folks just have math lessons, science lessons, language lessons. You might want to educate yourself on what are the features associated with that app. If that app is asking for credit card information, social security information, a lot of information that quite frankly is not needed for you to join, that should worry you. I would probably not use that app or that website. Lastly, ensure that your organization's policies and guide addresses requirements for physical and information security. That's more of a IT security matter. Specifically with Zoom, and they are working to address privacy and security matters. Ensure you have the most recent software update or app update of that particular platform. Zoom in particularly, they have updated their features where now by default it does not share with users. It doesn't mean it cannot happen, but the message here is familiarize yourself and get the most recent update version of your app. Some phones and laptops by default will trigger an update. Sometimes you have to manually click on that app and update it yourself. Let's talk about how to report these matters. From an FBI perspective, here in El Paso, you can Google us, but it's 915-832-5000. There will always be someone available, an agent, to take your call. The agent might not answer the phone call, but an agent will be triaged and sent your way through telephone. Another way is to contact ic3.gov. That's for internet-related crimes. So again, I'll repeat that, ic3.gov. And there you can report a complaint online. Let's focus a little bit now on education technology.
Agent, real
matters.
quick, you've frozen a little bit on me. Is anybody else frozen?
We'll take a quick pause.
Yeah, your screen is frozen on my end. Oh, now you're moving. Froze again.
Maybe I was being too still. Let me move a little bit.
Okay, you're good now.
Are we all good?
Where did he drop off? What was the last thing?
Maybe 30 seconds to a minute earlier is when it froze, but now it's back to normal. Everything's fine now.
Do you want him to repeat anything?
No.
Where did he drop?
I've been taking notes and I'm recording on my end.
Okay.
So we're good. I'm going to mute myself now. I just didn't know if that happened to somebody else.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like I said, we are going to talk a little bit about what was referred to as EdTech, education technology. So I just want to provide a couple of tips. A lot of it is, quite frankly, the tips I provided earlier regarding your children, how to monitor their online presence. So a couple of do's is, monitor the use of EdTech and online services. Research that EdTech. I spoke about that earlier. These online sites, these apps providing math tutoring, education lessons, and a multitude of things, right? And this is going to apply the younger your child, the more you probably want to scrutinize these matters. Conduct regular internet searches of children's information to monitor the exposure and spread of their information on the internet. Independent of these matters, just keep in mind that the more information you have of your children online, the easier it is to take over that identity, whether it be for not specific for crimes against children matters or child exploitation matters, but just for identity theft matters, right? Someone can open up an account, and now that's probably going to be more prevalent. Consider running a credit or identity theft check not only on yourself, but on your children, quite frankly. If your children's identity is stolen based on the information that's being made available in this current environment, they probably will never know about this until they are probably at least 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're trying to take out a credit card or get a driver's license or whatever the case might be. And then by that point, it might be too late. So don't just think about yourself as the income provider or the main financial support for your family. Think about your children from that perspective as well. Research school-related EdTech and other related vendors. There might be cyber breaches that they are educating the public on, but quite frankly, that is not something that is typically made on the news as much as we would like. Unless it's a massive firm, if it's something small and local, it's probably not going to get that much exposure. One thing we would say that just overarches all of this is don't provide exact information when creating these profiles. You don't have to give your full name. You don't have to give your address, your date of birth. A lot of times we see those little red asterisks when we're filling out an application online to gain access to an app. Sometimes you just have to put in an issue there or make up a name. You might want to keep track of what that is, but you don't have to put real information. And avoid putting actual photos of yourself unless absolutely necessary. So that's essentially, that's most of what I have. Just really quick, just to give you an idea, for last year, fiscal year 2009, the FBI, 2019, I apologize. Last year, the FBI opened over 3,000 cases that were associated with crimes against children. Okay, this doesn't involve human trafficking or other matters, just crimes against children. over 2,300 arrests and over 2,400 what we characterize as child locate or child identifies. Okay, that's essentially all I had. However, I want to leave you with a couple of closing notes. Okay, the internet is connecting your kids to the world. Do you know who in the world is connecting with them? Right? You probably only know who your friends are friends of in real life, but do you know who they are friends of on the internet, on those apps? Educate yourself about websites, softwares, games, apps that your children use. And quite frankly, you might want to know what your children's friends use, because the moment they're using something that your child isn't, your child is going to be using that. I would say the moment your child has a digital device that can connect to the internet, you should start to take precautions. It's hard to give them a digital device that doesn't connect to the internet, but once it does, start taking precautions. Be aware of what your children are doing online and monitor where they go. And report any inappropriate contact between an adult and your child to law enforcement immediately. You can also notify the site where that inappropriate contact is occurring. However, I would say notify law enforcement first. There might be reasons investigatively why we don't want that site to know, or we want to know before that site knows. So that is all I had. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here, and I'm open for questions if you have any. I'll let Jeanette unmute everybody, and we'll kind of go from there.
Go ahead. You guys have anything?
Can you talk about the Zoom bombing and how it was hacked, and I believe a bunch of children, third graders, were exposed to pornography?
So what incident are you referring to?
This is something that we were let known of how easy it was to get hacked, and that that had happened, that some third graders were exposed to porn through the EPISD Zoom app when they were doing these classes virtually. I don't know the exact incident, but this is something that we were told about. Were you guys notified, I assume, or?
So I could speak, I'll speak a little bit generic in nature, okay?
Okay.
We are aware of multiple Zoom incidents here in El Paso. In terms of, I want to just take a moment here because you used the word hacked. I know that's an easy term to use in terms of when somebody accesses a meeting without being allowed, but that really isn't hacking, right? The person just more likely than not saw the meeting ID or was just looking for meetings IDs and just logged on. So from a criminal perspective or potential criminal perspective, hacking is not what occurred or what might have occurred. I'm not going to speak specifically as to the EPISD incident that you're referring to, but when someone is accessing these virtual teleconferencing platforms and sharing pornography, that in itself perhaps might not be illegal. However, once you are doing that with children and the classroom is children, that is very likely a criminal matter. There's something called transfer of obscene material to a minor. So that's a possibility. In terms of Zoom itself, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of steps that can be taken to attempt to minimize that occurring. Like I said, you can create a password for your meeting. You can also enable the feature which allows a waiting room. Think about it as a doctor. When you go to the doctor's office, you're not immediately allowed to go see the doctor. You have to check in, wait, then you're taken to the room, and then eventually the doctor comes in. So there's features on Zoom like that as well as in other platforms. Something else that we highly advocate is not making your meeting IDs public. I canvass social media quite a bit due to the nature of what I do. However, what amazes me is how I see so many individuals advertising their meeting IDs and their passwords on social media. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to advertise to as big as a public as they can. However, you're advertising to folks that have no interest in what you are trying to set up, but you're just opening up the floodgates for them to join. Somebody just wrote a question, but via text.
I have a few questions, but they're in Spanish, so I don't know if you mind after answering this one that was typed, if you can follow up with me.
Okay, hold on just a sec. We have one from Julian. Do you want to read the question?
Okay, I'll read it out loud. What are some of the challenges regarding online child exploitation here on the border? Predators from across the border soliciting CP from El Paso children, websites in Latin America producing child porn, and making it available on popular U.S. platforms like Twitter or sharing platforms. That is probably about 5 to 6 questions in one.
Well, let's just tackle the online exploitation here what are some of the challenges here on
The biggest challenge for us is us being notified that an incident occurred. You would be amazed at what we can do with minimal amount of information. The biggest challenge is once we are advised of what's going on, just being notified of that. More importantly, when it comes to online predators, is being notified quickly. What tends to happen is that a student comes out to a parent, a legal guardian, someone at school, for administrative reasons or maybe because they're scared. It takes them a little bit of time to report it, and by then it might be too late. It might not be too late for us to identify who it is, but some of the investigative tools that we can use at that point are not as valuable. Think about this. I'll just put this thought on your head. If you are committing a criminal act and you are communicating with someone on a fairly daily basis, once you stop communicating with that person for a couple of days, a week or so, or even a month, how likely is that individual to start talking to you again when all of a sudden you're trying to make contact? So I would correlate that to what we see here for online predators. The moment a child or an administrator or parent discovers what's occurring, odds are the communication between that minor and the adult end. And that is great, because what's more important for us is the safety of that child. From an investigative perspective, the more time elapses, the less likely it is that that individual will believe that we are that child if we do something like pretend to be that child online. So that's one of the key challenges for us. Regarding your other questions, is that something we want to address right now or we want to do offline?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can talk about those offline. They don't pertain to what we're talking about here. So next questions.
I have a question if someone else is ready. I don't want to hog it up.
Go ahead.
Okay, so with coronavirus keeping children and families together in home sheltering, it seems like there's less of an opportunity for a child that's being abused either by a family member or someone outside their family to be able to report it to an authority like a counselor or a teacher or a principal. What are you guys doing to try to counter things like that? And I got this information from the New York Times article that had come out.
Yeah, that's very difficult. Right now, I would correlate that to what we're seeing regarding not only sexual abuse or contact offenses with a child, but domestic violence as a whole with adults. If you're restricted to your household, it's more difficult to report that. In terms of what we are doing, I have to follow up on that. That is something that from a victimization of children, I've attempted to liaison more with our CPS colleagues, our Child Protective Services. However, that is a challenge. although the online enticement of children is going to increase just due to the nature of kids being restricted to their home, contact offenses or the opportunity for predators to have in-person meets will drastically go down. However, that doesn't address when the alleged abuser is in the household. So that is a challenge.
You want to talk if they can reach out, the children can reach out, various different social media platforms and.
Yeah, there's various social media platforms. Well, the good thing is the same way that children are connected online for school-related matters, perhaps children can attempt to reach out to law enforcement or their teachers online while they're doing Zoom calls, Skype calls, whatever platform it is the school is using. It's difficult for me to give guidance on that right now because when you're in those meetings, you're not on a one-on-one setting. Everybody else is present. So what I would advise right now is perhaps that student can maybe ask to have a sidebar conversation with the teacher after that public meeting has ended, and whether it be through the text feature or video conference, perhaps like that it could be addressed. But that is a challenge right now, and I think that's a challenge for all.
¿Cree que pudiera en español darnos algunas recomendaciones pues para proteger a nuestros niños durante este tiempo que están más expuestos a cualquier tipo de cosas en el internet?
Well, todas las recomendaciones. Déjame empezar por decir, let me say it in English first. I speak Spanish. However, I will perhaps struggle a little bit. So let me answer that in Spanish. Las recomendaciones que yo te diría son esencialmente las recomendaciones que proveí en inglés. Si usted quiere, yo puedo repetir esa información, pero las sugerencias que yo tengo no son diferentes. ¿Es algo
Sí,
que usted quisiera?
Lo que pasa es que, por ejemplo, toda la información ya lo obtuve de inglés, pero necesito una entrevista en español para poderla poner en la televisión.
Perfecto. Vamos a hacer esto. Después de esta presentación, de esta conferencia, vamos a charlar con agente Harper a ver cómo hacemos algo individual con usted.
Perfecto, gracias.
For her circumstances, this is all in Spanish. She would like something in Spanish because everything I spoke to, even though recorded, is in English. Okay. So perhaps offline we could do something one-on-one and...
We'll just have her not hang up after this.
So después de esta llamada, no enganche y podemos platicar en español primordialmente.
Perfecto, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had another question, unless somebody else wants to go.
I'll jump in just real quick.
Go ahead.
Jacob Rambert, CBS 7. You kind of
Whoever this person is, I could barely hear you.
Okay, sorry. Here, maybe if I lean in, it'll be a little bit better.
That's better, yes.
Okay. So you talked about the Zoom bombing and kind of how it happens and what you can do to kind of protect yourself from it. But for our viewers that maybe don't know, you just tell us what Zoom bombing is.
Oh, what is Zoom bombing? I want you to talk about what Zoom bombing is.
We really didn't hear your question, but is it safe to say that you wanted a little bit more explanation regarding what Zoom bombing is?
Yes.
I would say Zoom bombing is essentially a term that's being used just in the general public for when someone hijacks a Zoom meeting. It's as simple as that. There's a lot more that goes into that, but like I said earlier, people want to use the term hijacked or took over an account or a lot of cyber-related matters. But Zoom bombing, in its essence, is someone joining a meeting who has not been invited to that meeting. That's how I would classify Zoom bombing. Now, The only times in which I think that becomes an issue is when the individual doing the Zoom bombing is doing something that's, nefarious in nature, something that is not pleasing to those of what that purpose or the purpose of what that meeting was for. While we've been seeing, and I'll let my partner, I'll let my partner pause me if I go a little bit beyond this, is beyond the sharing of pornography or sexually explicit material in these meetings. What we're seeing more frequent is individuals, for lack of a better term, Zoom bombing and sharing hateful speech or hateful images, or doing things that are inappropriate in nature. That's what we're seeing a large percentage of the times occurring during these Zoom bombings. Quite frankly, something that's somewhat innocent is sometimes you see people that are joining this meeting that just forget that they're being recorded, and they might be at their home not properly dressed and just get off of the couch and walk away. So that's not Zoom bombing. It might be inappropriate within your company's policy and culture to do that and not be cognizant of what's going on, but we get some of that as well. But Zoom bombing, in essence, is think about it as showing up in uninvited to a meeting and then doing stuff that that group is unwanted by that group. Anybody else?
I have one last question, if I can knock it out.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Child exploits is a huge thing. Kids are online more than ever, especially being stuck at home and doing remote learning. It's like dropping them off in a massive park alone with strangers. How early can they become victims?
I would say, to me, the moment your child has a digital device, like I said earlier, that can connect to the internet, from that moment on, they can become victims. End the story right there. The moment your child has access to the internet, whether that be through an iPad, whether it be through a phone, a leapfrog, your Xbox, it does not matter. Essentially, every platform nowadays has a chat feature, and even though that particular platform or the media under which your child is accessing the internet might not be the way in which a predator can elicit information or images from your child, what we typically see is that they tend to try to transfer to another platform, a platform that's more user-friendly for texting and is not built for group settings. So what we see a lot is children playing, whether it be gaming consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, whatever the case might be. And you're in a chat room talking to the people that you're playing with, but naturally you engage with others. So it's the same thing with any type of learning device. The moment you have the ability to talk to anybody, what we see is that those conversations then transfer to something else. So my guidance would be, we do here in the FBI, we do a lot of community outreach. We do a lot of outreach in the schools. And for the longest time, we would focus a lot on high schools, not only for human trafficking matters, but those exposed to online predators. What we're seeing now is that children at a lesser and lesser age, parents are giving them cell phones. The moment your child has a cell phone is the moment that not only your child is vulnerable, but your child's friends are vulnerable. Because those that don't have a cell phone are going to flock to those who have. The same way how in high school, at least when I went to high school a long time ago, my friends who had a car, they became my best friend because I wanted to find a way to get somewhere. Yeah, so to recap, I would say it's very typical to see children in middle school already being exposed to this. However, we're seeing kids as young as kindergarten, pre-K being exposed. Example, Zoom bombing. The moment a teacher sets up a meeting, the potential for that exists. And now, as young as kindergarten, possibly pre-K, these meetings are being set up.
Great, that answers my question. I appreciate it, Agent.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right, good. Thank you, Will and Jacob. Thank you for joining us. And now, Tatiana, if you can just stay on, we'll
Sí.